A millionaire arrived home late one night and overheard soft distress sounds coming from the family laundry room. As he drew nearer, he saw his son standing inside, engaged in an action that instantly sent a tremor of fear through him, compelling him to rush toward the boy with tears welling in his eyes. The clock on the car's dashboard flashed 2:15 a.m. as Lucas Sterling guided his vehicle smoothly past the iron gates of his sprawling estate. The long flight from Europe had drained his energy, but the eagerness to hold his wife and young son after 2 months apart made his weariness disappear. Lucas hauled his heavy suitcase along the pebble-strewn driveway, the wheels grinding sharply against the surface, shattering the absolute stillness of the night. He punched the code into the main door, the electronic lock clicking open with a dry sound. Lucas stepped inside, leaving the lights off, wanting to preserve the surprise for the following morning. He planned to tiptoe up to the second floor, slip into bed, and when the sun rose, Danny would be the first to yelp with delight upon seeing his father. But as he moved through the dark ground floor hallway, Lucas paused. A strange sound was emanating from the end of the corridor where the utility room was located. It wasn't the sound of the washing machine spinning, but a deliberate sound of rushing water interspersed with the rough, forceful scrubbing of fabric. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The rhythmic, urgent, and eerily echoing sounds resonated chillingly through the large house. Lucas frowned. The housekeeper was certainly asleep by now, and Elena would never soil her hands with laundry. He moved closer, the weak yellowish light spilling out from the slightly ajar door, casting long, ghostly streaks onto the wooden floor. Lucas placed his hand on the cold oak doorknob and pushed gently. The moment the door cracked open, a pungent, harsh odor immediately assaulted his senses, forcing Lucas to cover his nose and cough sharply. It wasn't the lavender scent of the fabric softener he was used to, but the acrid chemical smell of a powerful industrial floor cleanser, a smell usually encountered only in unsanitary public facilities. Through the hazy chemical mist, Danny's small figure materialized, making Lucas's heart clench. His 6-year-old son, usually plump and rosy-cheeked, was now perched precariously on an oversized plastic step stool. The boy was stripped to the waist, despite the biting draft from the central air conditioning. The yellow light clearly highlighted every rib protruding from his thin, exposed body. Danny was clutching a stiff scrubbing brush, both hands wildly working over his shorts, which were submerged in a basin of foaming white solution. "Danny!" Lucas uttered, his voice strained with alarm. He squinted for a closer look and felt as if he'd been punched hard in the chest. His son's tiny hands were bright red, as if scalded, and the skin on his fingertips was peeling off in large patches, exposing raw, inflamed flesh. The boy's abdomen and chest were covered in raised, bumpy red patches, a sign of severe, prolonged skin irritation. Hearing the call, Danny jumped. The brush plunked into the basin, splashing droplets of chemical solution onto the floor. The boy turned around. In those wide, round eyes, there was no light of joy or anticipation, only profound shock and sheer terror. Danny looked at his father as if seeing a monster or a punisher who had just stepped out of the darkness. Danny's reaction left Lucas stunned. The boy didn't run to embrace his father's legs. He recoiled, leaped off the stool, and tried to squeeze himself into the narrow, dark gap between the massive washing machine and the wall, as if attempting to vanish into it. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," Danny stammered, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. He hugged his knees tightly, concealing his trembling body, his eyes darting continuously toward the door as if watching for someone else. "I was cleaning. It's almost gone. The smell will be gone right away. Please don't put me in the closet. I promise not to make the house dirty again." Lucas tossed his suitcase aside and lunged forward to pick up his son. "Danny, it's Dad! What are you saying?" But just as Lucas bent down, he saw Danny begin to gasp for air. His son's chest heaved violently as if about to rupture his face, turning from flushed red to a bluish purple. The toxic fumes from the concentrated cleaning solution in the confined space had overwhelmed his fragile lungs. Danny's eyes slowly closed, his body going limp like a broken string rag doll. He slowly slumped onto the cold floor. Silence descended upon the room, broken only by the sound of water dripping from the shorts still soaking in the bubbling chemical basin. Danny's body went slack, slipping from Lucas's arms, forcing him to drop to his knees on the cold wooden floor to hold his son. "Danny, no! No!" Lucas bellowed the cry, tearing through the stillness of the mansion. The sound echoed off the four walls like the cry of a wounded creature. He swiftly scooped up his son's feather-light body. Through the skin, which was burning hot like a live coal, he felt the boy's heartbeat faint, terrifyingly erratic pulses. He kicked open the utility room door, sprinting toward the garage while simultaneously tilting his head back and shouting up the stairs, "Elena, get down here now!" Danny stopped breathing Elena. It took a while for the staircase light to flip on. Elena appeared on the landing. Unlike the polished, glamorous look in the photos she sent him daily, Elena now appeared unusually haggard. Her blonde hair was a mess, hurriedly pulled up with a loose clip, and dark, tired circles were prominent beneath her beautiful eyes. She leaned on the banister, walking unsteadily, her eyes dull like someone just roused from a deep sleep or a lingering stupor. Seeing Lucas holding an unconscious Danny, Elena froze. Her hand flew to her mouth, her wide eyes flashing genuine panic. She scrambled down the last few steps, nearly tripping. "Oh my God, Lucas, when did you get back? What happened to him?" "Open the garage door! Hurry!" Lucas roared, his eyes wild, having no presence of mind to explain. Elena instantly complied, fumbling with the button to raise the overhead door, then rushing to follow Lucas to the car. Her entire demeanor radiated agitation and worry. As Lucas laid Danny down on the back seat and scrambled into the driver's seat, Elena quickly got into the passenger seat. She was breathless, her hands trembling as she struggled to fasten her seatbelt, her forehead beaded with cold sweat. The car shot off into the night, tearing onto the main road. Lucas floored the gas pedal, one hand gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, the other reaching back repeatedly, rubbing his son's chest to stimulate breathing. "He has chemical poisoning. How are you watching him?" Lucas shouted. His anxiety making him lose control, his voice cracking with fury. Elena flinched at her husband's outburst. She leaned her head against the window, pressing her hands against her temples, as if enduring a terrible headache, her voice weak and laced with resignation. I'm sorry. I was so exhausted, Lucas. I haven't closed my eyes for 3 nights. The boy kept acting out, breaking things. I had to stay up all night keeping an eye on him. I just dozed off for a moment when you came home." She turned to Lucas, her eyes red and teary. Her drawn appearance and the faint whiff of stale alcohol, which Lucas in his panic hadn't registered, created a perfect facade of a mother exhausted from self-sacrifice. In reality, those white nights had been all-night parties at underground city bars while Lucas was away. But now her utter fatigue served as her best cover. Lucas glanced at his wife. Seeing her wasted look, his anger subsided a little, replaced by a mix of pity and concern. "All right, I'm sorry for yelling. Call St. Mary's Hospital right now. Tell them to prepare a ventilator." But Elena didn't make the call. Her hand reached into her purse for her phone, then paused. She turned to look at Danny lying still in the back seat. She swallowed hard, then turned back, placing a hand on Lucas's rigid arm, her voice shifting to a tone of reassurance, though her eyes avoided his. "Calm down, Lucas. Don't drive too fast. It's dangerous. Our son is in critical condition. Can't you see he's turning blue?" "I know, I'm worried about him too," Elena said quickly, trying to suppress a rising wave of nausea. "But you know Danny's ways. He did this last week too. He pretends to faint just so I can't leave the house. The doctor said it's just an emotional tactic for attention." Lucas froze, turning to stare at his wife in disbelief. The car swerved slightly. Pretend you're saying he's pretending when he's foaming at the mouth like that. Elena lowered her eyes, her voice growing firmer to conceal her discomfort. Yes, he knew you were coming home and wanted attention. I've been caring for him relentlessly all week. I know he just wants to torment me. I'm utterly worn out by his little games. Don't overreact. The hospital staff will just laugh at us for not knowing how to raise our son. Elena's words were like a bucket of cold water thrown onto Lucas in a firestorm. His earlier compassion completely vanished, replaced by a chill running down his spine. The woman beside him, lamenting her exhaustion from caring for the child and clutching her head in pain, was deliberately attempting to delay saving the boy with cold, merciless remarks. Lucas choked his throat dry. He realized Elena's exhaustion was real, but her concern for Danny was an act. Suddenly, a ghastly choking sound came from the back seat. Danny began to convulse violently. White foam spilled from his mouth, staining the expensive leather seats, mixing with fresh streaks of blood oozing from the corners of his lips. "Danny!" Elena screamed in terror. This time her fear was genuine. She gripped the door handle, her face drained of color. "Lucas, what is he coughing up?" Lucas didn't say another word to his wife. He gritted his teeth and made a sharp turn. The car pulled up to the emergency room entrance with the smell of burning rubber from the tires screeching on the asphalt. Without waiting for a gurney, Lucas flung open the door, scooped up his son, and ran inside, leaving Elena sitting there, her face ashen. She watched her husband's retreating back, her hands nervously twisting the silk fabric of her dress, her mind racing to formulate the next act to cover the bruises on the child's body. The emergency room doors slammed shut, swallowing the gurney and the medical team, leaving Lucas stranded in the cold hallway. The red, operating in progress, light flashed, burning brightly like a fire consuming the patience of a desperate father. Lucas couldn't sit still. He paced back and forth outside the room, the expensive leather soles of his shoes tapping a chaotic rhythm on the sterile white tile floor. The strong smell of antiseptic couldn't mask the chemical odor still clinging to his suit jacket, the smell of guilt, of neglect which he assigned to himself. A few yards away, Elena sat on the hard plastic waiting bench. She had regained her composure to a surprising degree. Her designer handbag placed beside her, Elena took out a compact, checking her reflection in the tiny mirror. "Could you stop pacing? It's making me dizzy." Lucas stopped spinning around to look at his wife. He saw her applying powder foundation under her eyes, the very area she had just been lamenting as dark and puffy from sleeplessness. "Our son is in there fighting for his life. Do you still have the presence of mind to apply makeup?" Elena snapped the compact shut, the dry click echoing in the quiet space. She sighed, her voice tinged with reproach, but keeping a moderate volume, maintaining the facade of a victim. "I have to maintain appearances, Lucas. Look at me. I look like a ghost. What will the doctors think of the Sterling family when they come out? That his mother is some frantic, disheveled lunatic." "They'll think his mother is heartless," Lucas retorted with rare vehemence. "Stop it." Elena stood up, walking toward the vending machine, completely ignoring her husband's anger. "I already told you the boy is just exaggerating. Just wait. The doctor will come out and say he has indigestion or something similar." An hour passed, heavy as a century. Lucas collapsed onto the floor, clutching his head, running his hands through his carefully styled hair. Every time the automatic door slid open, his heart jumped, but it was only a nurse coming out to fetch more blood or medication. Finally, when the clock showed 3:30 a.m., the head physician emerged. He was an older gentleman with white hair and eyes squinting behind thick glasses. In his hand, he held the lab results, but he didn't look at them. He looked straight at Lucas. That look lacked the usual sympathy of a healer. It was the look of a judge. Lucas sprang up, rushing over. "Doctor, how is my son?" The doctor didn't answer right away. He took a step back, maintaining distance, then held the paper out to Lucas. His finger tapped forcefully on the bolded lines of text. "We have flushed his stomach and given him high-flow oxygen. For now he is stable. But Mr. Sterling, I require a plausible explanation for this." Lucas took the paper, his hands shaking. The concentration of chlorine-based chemicals in his son's blood was 10 times the acceptable level. His nasal and throat membranes were damaged, but the line that sent a chill down Lucas's spine was at the bottom of the page. Multiple old and new bruises found mixed on the back and faint rope-like marks around the wrists. "Rope marks!" Lucas exclaimed, his voice cracking. "Are you suggesting my son was restrained? These are old scars layered over fresh ones. The skin on the boy's wrists is almost calloused from friction." The doctor lowered his voice, serious. "You are his father. Are you unaware of this, or are you deliberately choosing not to know?" Lucas was speechless. He turned to find Elena intending to demand an explanation, but before he could speak, a figure dashed past him. Elena sank to her knees right at the doctor's feet. She covered her face, a dramatic sob erupting, echoing throughout the empty corridor, drawing the curious stares of a few night-duty nurses. "Doctor, please save my child. It's my fault. All my fault." The doctor frowned, stepping back in surprise. "Madam, calm down." "What fault?" Elena frantically opened her handbag, her trembling hand dropping her lipstick onto the floor. She pulled out a worn, leather-bound notebook, its edges frayed, looking as though it had been handled many times. "I tried to hide it from my husband. I was afraid of breaking his heart." Elena spoke, her breath hitching, tears streaming down, blurring the powder she had just applied. "The boy. He has a severe psychological condition. He's always trying to punish himself." She held the notebook up high, flipping through the pages filled with neat handwritten entries. "Look, doctor, I documented everything to keep track. May 10th, Danny secretly took curtain cords to tie his hands in the bathroom. He said he was a bad boy and needed to be punished. May 15th, I caught him smelling the bleach bottle. He smiled and said he liked the clean smell." Elena lifted her tear-filled eyes to Lucas, a look full of the pain and quiet endurance of a misunderstood wife. "Lucas, I'm sorry. I hid all the cleaning solutions. I locked the cabinets carefully. But you were away, and the boy kept sneaking, prying the doors open to find them. I had to watch him all night, but if I slipped up for just a moment, he'd hurt himself and then scream and blame me. I've been through so much." Lucas stood motionless, Elena's words coupled with the faded diary in her hand. He remembered Danny in the utility room, the boy saying, "Mama Elena said I was dirty." But now that statement was distorted into the delusion of a mentally troubled child. The doctor took the notebook. He quickly scanned the diary entries, which were filled with detailed descriptions of Danny's self-destructive behaviors. His expression softened. The initial suspicion toward the parents gradually shifted to professional concern. Behavioral disorder in children. The doctor murmured, then looked at the bewildered Lucas. "If what's written here is accurate, the child's condition is more complex than I thought. Those restraint marks. Did he inflict them upon himself?" "Yes, he did," Elena nodded repeatedly, sobbing. "He said his hands kept doing bad things, so he had to tie them up. When I tried to stop him, he bit me." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a faint, fading bruise. The doctor sighed, closed the notebook, and handed it to Lucas. He patted the distraught man's shoulder, his voice becoming gentler, advisory. "Mr. Sterling, I apologize for my attitude earlier. If this is a psychiatric condition, the family needs to act immediately. Keeping the child at home in a normal environment is too dangerous. You and your wife should consider isolation and moving the boy to a specialized facility for evaluation and treatment as soon as possible." Lucas held the diary in his hands. The leather cover was cold. He read the lines of writing. Danny said he wanted to drink the cleaning solution to cleanse his dirty insides. Each word was like a needle piercing his brain. Confusion began to set in, gnawing at the father's logic. Had he neglected his son too much? Could Danny really be ill without his knowledge? The image of the boy huddled in the utility room returned. Was that fear or madness? Lucas stood frozen in the stark white hospital corridor. On one side was his wife, sobbing dramatically on the floor. On the other, the closed door of the emergency room. The sound of leather shoes hitting the rough tile floor clattered urgently from the direction of the elevator. Lucas still stood there, his eyes fixed on the diary, cover his mind, reeling in a complex mess of belief and doubt. "Lucas." A deep, familiar voice rang out, pulling Lucas out of the quicksand of his thoughts. Marcus appeared. He had his usual polished look, even at this hour wearing a long trench coat and holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. Marcus was his best friend of 20 years and the trusted right hand who ran the corporation in Lucas's absence. His arrival now offered a degree of solace to Lucas's heart. "I heard the news and rushed right over. How is the situation?" Marcus walked up, placing a hand on Lucas's shoulder, squeezing it lightly to convey understanding and reassurance. He handed Lucas a coffee. "Take this. You look awful." Lucas accepted the coffee. The warmth spread through the paper cup, but it couldn't dispel the chill in his heart. He gestured with his chin toward Elena, who was huddled on the waiting bench, still dabbing her eyes. "The doctor said Danny shows signs of self-harm." Elena presented this diary. "I don't know what to think anymore." Marcus narrowed his eyes, casting a quick glance at Elena, then turned back to Lucas, lowering his voice to a whisper. "This isn't the best place to talk. Let's step over there." He gently guided Lucas toward the secluded area near the emergency exit staircase, where a window was slightly ajar, letting in the cold night breeze, completely separate from the eyes and ears of others. Under the dim yellow light of the stairwell, Marcus took a sip of his coffee, his face contorted in deep thought. "You know, Lucas, I don't want to say this when you're so overwhelmed, but I think Elena, she's too fragile. She can't handle Danny." Lucas frowned. "What do you mean?" "I've been quietly investigating for a few weeks now since I noticed strange behavior from Danny on the security cameras." Marcus set his coffee cup down on the windowsill, his tone turning secretive and serious. "I don't think Elena is making up the stories about Danny, but the cause that's provoking the boy. I suspect it's your housekeeper, Ms. Gable." "Ms. Gable, but she's mute. She loves Danny the most in the house, and we've never had any issues with her in the 10 years she's been with us." Lucas immediately objected. Marcus shook his head, his expression full of regret for his friend's naivety. He pulled a thin blue folder from his leather briefcase. "Older people sometimes have misguided beliefs, Lucas. Take a look at this." He pulled out a few blurry, candid photos, but clear enough to show Ms. Gable in the kitchen, fussing over strange bundles of leaves and boiling a pot of dark, murky liquid. There are whispers that she follows some archaic cults, believing that giving children certain poisonous leaves to drink will ward off evil spirits. I suspect this very liquid caused Danny's hallucinations, making the boy itch and leading him to scratch himself. Elena is just the one cleaning up the consequences. Lucas stared at the photos. His belief was shaken violently. Ms. Gable had been dismissed 2 weeks ago, precisely when he began receiving strange reports about his son's health. To protect the Sterling Corporation's reputation, and most importantly to save Danny's life, we cannot let this leak to the press. I've contacted a facility. He handed Lucas a brochure. It featured a picture of an ancient castle nestled among the snow-capped Swiss Alps, the Dr. Mueller Psychological Sanatorium, Switzerland, specializing in self-destructive behavior and personality disorders in children. "This is the best place in the world, Lucas. Isolated, secure, and with a top-tier team of specialists. They will isolate Danny from the toxic environment at home, weaning him off the hallucinatory substances that Ms. Gable has inflicted upon him." Marcus continuously pressed his deep voice, carrying a persuasive power. "I used my private connections to secure a spot for Danny. The admission procedures there are extremely rigorous. If you agree, a medical helicopter can take the boy there this very morning. All you need to do is sign here." He spread a pre-drafted guardian power of attorney and transfer agreement onto the dusty windowsill. His expensive Mont Blanc fountain pen was thrust into Lucas's hand. "Sign it, Lucas. Do the right thing for your son. Don't let him slowly wither away in that house." Lucas took the pen. The cold metal casing touched his skin. His eyes scanned the dry legal texts. Granting full power of attorney over assets and medical custody, transferred to Zurich indefinitely. In Lucas's mind, He pictured Danny being treated living in the fresh Swiss air, free from his nights of secretly scrubbing clothes in the darkness. It seemed like the only way out. The nib touched the paper. A small black dot of ink began to seep in, but at that precise moment, a flash of memory jolted through Lucas's mind. He remembered Danny's eyes in the utility room at 2 a.m. "Please don't put me in the closet. I cleaned it myself." That plea, it was too clear-headed, too specific. A child suffering from hallucinations would fear the monsters in their mind, not the physical punishment of being locked in a closet for not cleaning properly. That look was a cry for help, a real fear of a concrete punishment. The instinct of a father, which had been buried by sophisticated lies for the past 2 hours, suddenly surged with the force of a flame fanned by the wind. Click. Lucas dropped the pen onto the cement floor. The sharp sound of the impact echoed in the narrow stairwell. Marcus flinched, his half-smile fading. "What is it, Lucas? Just sign it." Lucas stepped back, lifting his head to look directly into the eyes of his friend of 20 years. For the first time, he saw past the sophisticated glasses a chilling calculation waiting to devour his signature. "No." Lucas said, his voice hoarse but resolute. "What did you say?" Marcus snapped, his voice impatient. "Are you insane?" The boy is in critical condition. This is his only chance. "I'm not signing yet." Lucas shook his head, his gaze razor sharp. "I won't let my son go anywhere until he wakes up and tells me with his own mouth who was the one who tied his hands." Marcus was stunned. He made a move to pick up the pen, but Lucas had already turned his back. "I need to use the restroom for a minute. You stay here with Elena." Lucas quickly walked out of the emergency exit, leaving Marcus frozen there with the unfinished folder in his hand. Marcus watched Lucas's retreating back, his eyes shifting from fake worry to cold malice. But Lucas was not going to the restroom. He rushed out the main hospital door, the night wind hitting his face, clearing his head like a shot of adrenaline. He climbed into his car, which was still awkwardly parked on the roadside, and started the engine. The tires squealed on the asphalt. Lucas wasn't going home. He remembered the address in the old personnel file he had once reviewed. He was going to find the only witness who truly knew what had been happening in the house during his absence. The slum district on the far west edge of the city appeared in the yellow glare of the luxury car's headlights. Lucas slowed down his wheels, grinding over black puddles splashing water onto the cracked sidewalk. The contrast between the gleaming car and the dilapidated damp apartment buildings made his presence starkly out of place and conspicuous. Lucas stopped the car in front of house number 4. The wooden door, rotten and peeling paint, was wedged between 2 moldy walls. He took a deep breath, trying to suppress the trembling spreading from his chest, not from the cold, but from the fear of confronting the truth he had missed. He knocked on the door. 3 dry raps. A rustling sound came from inside, then silence. Lucas knocked again, harder. The door cracked open just enough for a watchful eye to peer out. It was Ms. Gable. When she recognized the man standing outside as Lucas Sterling, her powerful former employer, her eyes widened in terror. She hastily used all her strength to slam the door shut as if trying to keep out a catastrophe. "Ms. Gable, wait!" Lucas quickly wedged the tip of his shoe into the door gap, his hand gripping the rough wooden edge. He didn't use force to overpower her. Instead, he pulled his phone from his jacket pocket. The screen lit up, displaying the picture he had hurriedly taken in the emergency room. Danny lying unconscious, covered in tubes and wires, his small face swallowed by the cold medical equipment. He held the screen close to the door crack. "Danny is in critical condition. I didn't come here to reprimand you. I need you to save my son." The door stopped shaking. A stifled sob came from behind the rotten wood. Ms. Gable slowly opened the door. Seeing the child she loved like her own flesh fading on the phone screen, the elderly woman burst into silent tears. Her frail shoulders trembled uncontrollably, and she pulled Lucas's hand, yanking him into the cramped room which reeked of mildew and the cheap cigarette smoke from neighboring units. The room was barely 15 square meters, containing nothing but a rickety single bed and a few cardboard boxes. Ms. Gable didn't let Lucas say another word. She silently crawled under the bed, pulling out a black plastic bag tightly secured with a rubber band, the only possession she had secretly brought with her when Elena had chased her out of the house on a rainy night 2 weeks prior. She sat on the cold cement floor, her hands trembling as she untied the knot. She dumped the contents of the bag onto the floor. The plastic objects clattered together. Lucas squinted. Before him were dozens of empty bottles of children's bathwash and shampoo. Pink and blue bottles adorned with images of cheerful little ducks, labeled with the names of the most expensive brands he routinely ordered from abroad for Danny. They looked completely normal, even brand new. Lucas looked up at Ms. Gable, his eyes full of confusion. "These are—" Ms. Gable didn't answer. She picked up an empty bottle, her rough hands forcefully twisting the cap. She held the empty bottle close to Lucas's face, motioning for him to smell it. Lucas took the plastic bottle, holding it to his nose and taking a light sniff. Instantly, he recoiled, his nose burning as if someone had rubbed chili on it. The gentle scent of chamomile bathwash or baby powder was completely gone. In its place was an extremely harsh, pungent, acrid smell that shot straight into his brain. It was the smell of concentrated chlorine, the smell of the strongest industrial-grade floor-cleaning acid, the same odor he had detected in the utility room last night, the smell that still clung to his son's skin. "Oh my God," Lucas whispered, his hand gripping the plastic bottle so tightly it creaked and crumpled. Ms. Gable began to use body language to reenact the nightmare she had witnessed. She pointed to the empty bottles, then pointed to an old newspaper on the floor that had a fashion model advertisement. She was referring to Elena. She mimicked the action of twisting the caps off large chemical containers, carefully pouring the toxic liquid into these small, cute bath wash bottles. Next, she demonstrated scrubbing aggressively onto her own arm, her face contorted, making small, strained noises as if wailing on Danny's behalf. She pointed to her eyes, then shook her head frantically, illustrating how Danny had cried and pleaded, but no one had heard him. Lucas looked at the empty bottles scattered on the floor. The truth about Danny's allergy and the burns on his skin was laid bare. It wasn't a biological condition, nor was it the elderly housekeeper using strange leaves. It was the wife he had trusted, the stepmother, who always appeared sweet in his presence, who had been secretly poisoning his son's body, daily turning bath time into a horrific hour of torture. But Ms. Gable wasn't finished. Wiping her tears, she fumbled inside the pocket of an old jacket hanging on the wall. She pulled out a crumpled, balled-up piece of paper. She smoothed it out on the floor, pushing it toward Lucas. It was an International Express delivery receipt she had retrieved from the trash bin in Lucas's study before being fired. She had kept it only because she saw her young master's name on it, an instinct telling her something was wrong. Lucas bent down. The dim light from the wire filament bulb highlighted every line of black ink. Sender Elena Sterling. Recipient Dr. Mueller Trust and Custody Fund, Zurich, Switzerland. Contents medical records and power of attorney document copy. Lucas froze. The name Dr. Mueller and the Zurich address perfectly matched the address of the sanatorium Marcus had shown him at the hospital less than an hour ago. A cold current ran down Lucas's spine, raising the hairs on his neck. Why had his wife sent Danny's file to a Swiss facility before he even returned home? Why did Marcus have the power of attorney contract ready at this exact moment, pressuring him to sign? And why was the recipient's address a financial trust fund and not a hospital? The disjointed pieces suddenly connected, forming a grotesque picture. This was not just abuse. This was an organized conspiracy, an intricate trap set to devour his precious son and the entire fortune he had intended for him. Rage erupted in Lucas's chest, incinerating his doubt and grief, leaving only the cold, sharp clarity of a father facing his foe. Thank you. You have saved my son's life. Lucas grasped Ms. Gable's rough hands, squeezing them tightly as a silent pledge. He stood up abruptly, rushing out of the rental room. Lucas got into the car, slamming the door shut. He didn't start the engine immediately, but slumped over the steering wheel, his breath ragged. He needed proof. These bottles in the receipt were not enough to expose their deception in court. He needed something more direct, something that could speak on behalf of his son who lay still in the hospital. And he remembered. In that house, there was still another set of eyes that always watched over Danny. Lucas hit the gas. The car sped off, leaving the dark alley behind, driving straight toward the Sterling mansion like an arrow carrying a father's wrath. Lucas's car turned into the mansion gate as the eastern sky began to lighten with a gloomy gray. Lucas entered the house quickly, heading to the second floor and pushing open the door to Danny's bedroom. The room was a mess, like a battleground after a storm. Clothes were scattered, the bedsheets tangled, traces of the nights Danny had writhed in agonizing itchiness. Lucas turned on his phone's flashlight, the white beam sweeping across the expensive, lifeless toys strewn on the floor. He began to search. The overturned pillows shone the light under the bed and flung open the closet doors. "Where is it? Where are you?" Lucas muttered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning running. Finally, the flashlight beam swept across a corner of the room behind the thick velvet window curtains. A brown teddy bear lay face down against the wall, covered in dust. It was the gift he had given Danny before leaving for his trip, a gift Elena had scorned as cheap junk and tossed into this corner. Lucas lunged forward, snatching the bear. He brushed the dust off its soft fur, feeling as though he were touching his son's skin. He recalled the baby monitor sleep monitoring feature with built-in AI that he had secretly installed out of curiosity for the new technology. It would automatically activate recording and save to a memory card upon detecting loud noises or prolonged crying. Lucas's hand trembled as he flipped the bear over, using his fingernail to pry open the battery compartment cover. The tiny memory card dropped into his palm, ice cold. Lucas sat on the wooden floor amidst the jumble of toys. He opened his personal laptop, which he'd carried in his briefcase, and inserted the memory card into the reader. The screen lit up, displaying a list of dozens of audio files recorded over the past 2 months. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest. He moved the mouse to the latest file recorded the previous afternoon, just before he boarded the plane home. His finger hovered over the enter key. He was afraid. He was afraid to hear his son's cries, but he was compelled to listen. Click. The silence was ripped apart by the sound emanating from the laptop speakers. Noise, heavy footsteps, and then a sharp, piercing shout. "I forbid you to tell your father. You wash these pants, clean yourself. If there is one stain left, don't blame me." It was Elena's voice. Without any false sweetness, her voice hissed like a venomous snake. Next came the sound of whipping, cracking. The sound of a leather strap striking flesh, once, twice, and then Danny's terrified wails, choked sobs stuck in his throat from fear. "Mommy, I hurt. I'm sorry. I'll wash it clean. Please don't hurt me." Lucas squeezed his eyes shut, clenching his fists so tightly that his nails dug into his skin, drawing blood. Hot tears streamed down his cheeks. He wanted to slam the laptop shut, wanted to cover his ears to escape this pain. Every strike of the strap was a direct blow to his heart, but he forced his eyes open, forcing himself to keep listening. He needed to know everything. Suddenly, the audio file transitioned to a different conversation. Danny's cries had stopped, replaced by the clinking of glassware. A man's voice rang out, deep, familiar, the voice he had listened to for 20 years, the voice of his closest friend. It was Marcus. In the recording, Marcus's voice was mocking, complacent, and so chillingly cold that the blood in Lucas's body froze. "You played the struggling stepmother role perfectly, darling. That fool Lucas bought it completely. I've prepared all the paperwork. As soon as he signs to send that brat to Switzerland, I'll have someone over there administer the medication to make him genuinely imbecilic. A vegetative child will never be able to file a lawsuit." Elena giggled, her voice seductive and flirtatious. "You're so clever, Marcus. I'm sick of looking at his face, sick of playing this game with old Lucas. When does the money come in?" Marcus sneered, his laugh echoing in the empty room like the sound of a demon. "Patience. $50 million of the boys' trust fund will soon be under our guardianship. Then we'll run off, leaving Lucas with a crazy child and an empty shell of a company. He'll crumble, and we'll be kings." Lucas slammed the laptop shut with immense force. Thud. The sound cut off. Absolute silence fell over the room. Only the wind whistled through the window gap. Lucas sat still in the dark. He didn't scream. He didn't smash things. The profound agony, the bitter betrayal had burned away all his tears. All that remained was a cold, hard pile of ash. He stood up and walked into the bathroom. He splashed cold water on his face, washing away the traces of weak tears. He looked in the mirror. In his bloodshot eyes there was no longer confusion, no longer hesitation, only the sharp gaze of a predator preparing for the decisive pounce. Lucas straightened his shirt collar, smoothing his messy hair. He stepped out of the bathroom with a terrifying calmness. He picked up his phone and dialed Marcus's number. It rang twice. The other end answered. "Lucas, where are you? I was worried." Marcus's voice was warm, filled with fake concern. Lucas took a deep breath, adjusting his voice to sound tired, desperate, and resigned, a perfect performance for those who love to act. "Hello, Marcus," Lucas said, his voice hoarse, as if utterly spent. "I've thought it through. You're right. I can't take care of Danny. I give up." "That's a very sensible decision, my friend." Marcus's voice could not hide his elation. "Bring the documents to the house," Lucas said, staring into the void where he imagined the triumphant faces of the two traitors. "I'll sign everything tonight. I want this to be over." He hung up. A cold smile curled on Lucas's lips. The curtain was closing on their play, but the feast of justice was just about to begin. The grand living room of the Sterling mansion was immersed in the dim light of the wall sconces, creating a yellow, oppressive atmosphere. Lucas sat alone on the dark leather armchair, facing the polished ebony coffee table, the spot where the transaction determining his family's fate would soon take place. He reached out to adjust the large arrangement of lilies placed in the corner of the room. Hidden behind the pristine white petals was a tiny camera lens blinking a red light, ready to record every gesture, every flicker of emotion from the people about to enter. Lucas checked the Bluetooth connection on his phone, ensuring the expensive surround sound system was synchronized with the damning audio file on his device. Everything was ready. He poured a glass of whiskey, not to drink, but to let the strong smell of alcohol cling to his breath, creating the perfect cover for a defeated man seeking oblivion in drink. The doorbell rang, shattering the silence. Lucas took a deep breath. He relaxed his facial muscles, letting his shoulders slump. The sharp gaze of the predator vanished, replaced by a vacant, weary, and desperate look. He walked out and opened the door. Marcus and Elena stood there. Both were dressed so meticulously they were almost dazzling. Marcus wore an elegant navy suit carrying his familiar leather briefcase. Elena stood beside him, her arm linked with his, wearing a sophisticated deep black evening gown. Although they tried to hide it with thick powder and a facade of worry, Lucas saw the excitement in their eyes, the excitement of vultures spotting a corpse. "Lucas, are you all right? You look terrible." Marcus stepped inside, his voice deep and full of concern. He patted Lucas on the shoulder, a gesture not of sharing, but of checking if the prey had truly collapsed. "Come in," Lucas mumbled, his voice hoarse, moving aside to let them pass. "I'm exhausted, Marcus. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore." Elena followed her heavy perfume, making Lucas feel sick. She sat on the sofa, dabbing her dry eyes with a handkerchief. "I'm so worried about you, Lucas. Marcus and I have been rushing around all day, arranging the paperwork for Danny. Don't torment yourself anymore. This is the best way for the boy." Lucas sat down opposite them. He picked up the whiskey bottle, his hand deliberately trembling, causing the liquor to spill over the rim of the glass, dripping onto the glass tabletop. "I'm a terrible father." Lucas buried his face in his hands, his voice catching. "I let my son get sick without knowing. Now I just want to let go. I want to go somewhere far away. Will you take care of Danny for me, Marcus?" Marcus glanced at Elena, a discreet smug wink passing between them. He placed the leather briefcase on the table. The metallic click of the latch opening was clearly audible in the quiet space. He pulled out the thick folder Lucas had seen at the hospital and pushed it forward. "Don't say that. You're my friend. Danny's like my own son. Just sign here granting me the asset and guardianship power of attorney. I will take the boy to Switzerland tonight. He'll have the best doctors there, and he'll forget all the pain he experienced here." Marcus pulled the gold-plated Mont Blanc fountain pen from his breast pocket. He uncapped it, turned the nib toward Lucas, and pressed it lightly into his friend's hand. "Sign it, and everything will be over." Lucas took the pen. He felt its weight and the weight of the greed suffocating the air in the room. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes behind the glasses, flashing with ultimate avarice, as if he were looking at a mountain of $50 million instead of a piece of paper. Elena held her breath, her hands tightly clasped, her eyes glued to the pen nib in her husband's hand. The pen nib touched the paper. A small dot of black ink spread. The room was utterly silent. The tick-tock, tick-tock of the wall clock counted down each fateful second. Abruptly, Lucas stopped. He didn't sign. He looked up. The haggard, drunken appearance completely vanished as if it had never existed. Lucas sat up straight, his gaze razor-sharp, boring into Marcus's core. The sudden change startled Marcus, causing him to instinctively recoil. "What is it, Lucas? Why did you stop?" Marcus asked. His voice beginning to tremble. Lucas didn't answer. He slowly withdrew his left hand from his suit pocket. A crumpled, balled-up piece of paper was forcefully tossed onto the glass table. Plop! The paper unfurled, revealing lines of black ink and a familiar signature in the bottom corner, Marcus's guarantee signature at an industrial chemical supply store. "How do you explain this, good friend?" Lucas asked, his voice calm but icy. Marcus and Elena stared at the receipt. Marcus's face drained of color, turning from flushed to ashen. Elena gasped, covering her mouth to stifle her shock. This is a mistake. Where did you get this trash?" Marcus stammered, attempting to salvage his last bit of composure. "A mistake, you say?" Lucas smirked. His thumb casually pressed the play button on his phone screen, which was already positioned on the table. The high-powered surround sound system in the living room exploded. The silence was torn apart by an unnervingly familiar sound. That fool Lucas bought it completely. $50 million will belong to us. Marcus's voice reverberated from the four walls, assaulting their eardrums, seeping into every corner of the room. It was loud, clear, and exposed. Next was Elena's giggling, "I'm sick of looking at his face. When does the money come in?" Elena let out a piercing shriek. She jumped up, clutching her head with both hands, covering her ears as if to block out the ghostly sound. "Turn it off! Turn it off now! It's not me! That's not me!" Marcus was frozen stiff. He looked at Lucas, then at the phone, his eyes wide with horror. He understood. The trap had sprung, and he, the one who always considered himself the clever hunter, was now caught securely in the net. You set me up!" Marcus hissed, his face distorted with rage and fear. He lunged across the table, intending to grab the phone and smash the evidence. But Lucas was quicker. He stood up, took a step back, and kicked the side of the table hard. The heavy wooden table slid, blocking Marcus's rush, causing him to stumble and fall headfirst onto the floor. "It's over, Marcus." At the same moment, the main door and the side door of the living room burst open simultaneously. Blinding headlights shone directly inside, making Elena squint and shrink into the corner. Figures in police uniforms poured in like a flood, the sound of their heavy boots thudding authoritatively on the wooden floor. "Police freeze hands behind your heads." The economic crimes and social order units quickly surrounded the room. Marcus, in the depths of despair, scrambled to his feet, trying to make a dash for the window to escape. But before he could touch the curtains, two burly officers wrestled him to the floor. "Let go of me! You have no right! I'm a lawyer!" Marcus screamed, struggling in vain. Lucas stood still, watching his friend of 20 years being pressed face down onto the floor, his elegant suit now miserably crumpled. Clink, clank. The dry sound of metal colliding echoed. Two cold pairs of handcuffs were locked onto Marcus and Elena. Elena had stopped screaming. She slumped to the ground, tears blurring her makeup, turning her beautiful face into a grotesque clown mask. The police captain stepped forward, nodded to Lucas, and signaled his subordinates to escort the two perpetrators out. Lucas followed them to the door. He watched the marked police car with its flashing blue and red lights, watching the two traitors being pushed into the cold metal compartment. He felt no triumph. He only felt a vast emptiness, but an emptiness necessary to start anew. His eyes followed the car as it disappeared without a trace of doubt or clinging. He had protected his family even if the price was the shattered belief in humanity. The interrogation room at the Chicago Police Department was colder than any place Lucas had ever been. 4 walls painted a dreary gray, a metal table bolted to the floor, and harsh white neon lights illuminating every dust particle hanging in the air. Marcus sat opposite the interrogator. Although his hands were cuffed to the chair, he still attempted to maintain the arrogant demeanor of a top-tier lawyer. He sat upright, his chin tilted up, his eyes full of defiance. "I won't say anything until my lawyer arrives," Marcus stated coldly. "You are making an illegal arrest. That audio recording is fabricated. It's a setup. Lucas is delusional. He's jealous of my capabilities and wants to frame me." The interrogator, a middle-aged man with a stern face, said nothing. He slowly opened the file in front of him, pulling out a small black USB drive. It was the data extracted from the teddy bear recorder. He plugged the USB into a laptop, turning the screen toward Marcus. But he didn't play the recording. He opened another text file. "We have more than just the audio, Mr. Marcus." He placed a paper with shaky but clear handwriting on the table. "This is the testimony of Ms. Gable. She confirmed that you repeatedly visited the house to supply Elena with chemicals. And this," he pulled out a stack of banking documents, "is a statement of funds transferred from your account to a shell company in Switzerland, the very company where you plan to deposit young Danny's inheritance." Marcus stared at the dancing figures before his eyes. The confidence on his face began to crumble. He knew those transactions well. He had thought he had concealed them meticulously through offshore companies, but he had forgotten one thing. Once the dam breaks, the water sweeps away everything. And most importantly, the interrogator leaned forward, his voice hardening. "We found your fingerprints on the cap of the chemical bottle that Ms. Gable kept. You personally mixed those solutions, didn't you?" Marcus's head bowing onto the cold metal table was the clearest answer. His shoulders shook not with tears, but with the collapse of the delusional empire he had so painstakingly built. He knew his career, his reputation, and his entire life of freedom had ended here. In the adjacent room, the situation unfolded much faster. Elena did not possess Marcus's resilience. As soon as the police presented the photo of Danny lying in the emergency room, she broke down. She cried hysterically, begging for leniency. "It wasn't me. Marcus instigated me." Elena wailed, tears and snot streaming down her face. "He told me if the boy just got sick, Lucas would get fed up and hand over the control. I just wanted money for shopping. I didn't mean to hurt him." Elena's every statement was like a knife, severing the thread of criminal connection between the two culprits. She admitted to the psychological mistreatment, confessed to starving and hitting Danny to pressure Lucas. Her cowardice and selfishness were laid bare under the interrogation lights. Lucas stood in the observation room behind the one-way glass. He saw everything. He heard everything through the speaker system. He looked at Elena, the woman he once called his wife, now revealed to be a greedy, shallow person. He looked at Marcus, his best friend, now just a despicable fraudster. He saw the belated regret in Elena's eyes and the desperate resentment in Marcus's. But strangely, Lucas's heart was calm as a still autumn lake. No more burning rage, no more gut-wrenching pain. Only indifference remained. They had become strangers. They had become the past. Mr. Sterling. The police chief walked in, interrupting Lucas's thoughts. "We have enough evidence for prosecution. A long-term pretrial detention order will be issued immediately on charges of fraudulent misappropriation of assets, commercial conspiracy, and intentional infliction of injury upon a child. You can rest assured now." Lucas nodded faintly. He picked up the pen on the table, signing the final confirmation of his statement. His handwriting was decisive and strong, no longer trembling as it had when he held the pen in front of Marcus. "Thank you, gentlemen. Please ensure they pay for every scar on my son's body." He shook the police chief's hand, then turned and walked out of the room heavy with the stench of guilt. Lucas stepped out of the courthouse just as the city of Chicago began to wake up. The bright morning sun shone onto the skyscrapers, reflecting glittering lights onto the streets still damp with night dew. The early morning wind blew on his face, bringing a cold but strangely clean air. He took a deep breath, feeling his lungs fill with the air of freedom. The nightmare of the past 2 months was over. Lucas took out his phone. He dialed the number for the mansion. "Hello, Mr. Sterling." The voice of the newly hired butler rang out respectfully. "Listen to my instructions," Lucas said, his voice deep but commanding. "Have my people remove all of Elena's and Marcus's belongings from the house. Clothes, paintings, anything connected to them. Burn it all or throw it away. I want the house completely clean when I return. Not a trace of them should remain in the living space of me and Danny." "Yes, sir. I will do it immediately." Lucas hung up. He walked down the marble steps heading toward the waiting car. This time he didn't feel lonely anymore. The car rolled away, leaving the imposing police building behind, leaving the dark past sealed behind prison bars. Lucas stepped on the gas heading toward St. Mary's Hospital. Danny was waiting for him there. And this time, he would arrive as a whole father, the one who would take his son's hand and walk into the light, leaving the darkness forever behind them. 3 days after picking Danny up from the hospital, Lucas drove his son home himself. No personal chauffeur, no bodyguards, just the two of them in the quiet space of the car. Danny sat in the passenger seat, his small frame dwarfed by the seatbelt. The boy kept fiddling with the hem of his shirt, his wide eyes staring out the window, not daring to look directly at the familiar sights rushing past. As the ornate iron gates of the Sterling mansion appeared at the end of the road, Lucas clearly saw his son's shoulders tense up, a reflex of deeply ingrained fear. The car stopped in the front yard. Lucas turned off the engine and looked at his son. "We're home now." Danny didn't reply, his small hand clutching the safety buckle like a lifeline. Lucas got out of the car, walked around, and opened the door for his son. He didn't rush him, just patiently held out his large hand and waited. After a long moment, Danny's thin fingers timidly settled into his palm. Warmth passed through their skin, a fragile but precious connection. "It's going to be very different. Do you want to take a look inside?" Danny nodded faintly, taking tentative steps with his father. The front door opened. Danny squinted, mentally bracing for the usual darkness and coldness. But no. He stopped, stunned, right on the threshold. The gloomy mansion was gone. The thick burgundy velvet curtains, which had always blocked the light so Elena could protect her complexion, had been completely removed. In their place were sheer, pristine white voile curtains gently fluttering, welcoming the full, brilliant morning sunlight into the house. The cold marble decorative statues were also gone, replaced by vibrant green potted plants placed in all the corners, bringing fresh vitality. "Our house, it's so bright, Dad." "That's right. From now on, our house will always be this bright." Lucas led his son down the ground floor hallway. Their destination was the place that had been his worst nightmare, the utility room at the end of the hall. Danny slowed down his hand, starting to tremble, sweat dampening Lucas's palm. He remembered the sound of the washing machine spinning, the strong smell of detergent, and the basin of foaming white water. But when they arrived, the heavy oak door had been removed from its hinges, leaving only the empty frame. Beside it lay a small hammer wrapped in a blue ribbon. Lucas released his son's hand, picked up the hammer, and offered the handle to Danny. "Do you want to help Dad with something?" Danny looked up at his father, his eyes full of doubt. "Do it. Tear it down. I don't like this room anymore. We're going to knock it down to build something more fun. Do you want to be the one to strike the first blow?" Danny looked at the hammer, then at the dark void inside the utility room. A spark of courage flashed in his eyes. He took the hammer with both hands. Clank. A light tap on the wooden door frame. "Harder, son. It can't hurt you anymore." Danny took a deep breath, swinging his arms harder. Thud. The dry sound of wood resonated. Then another strike. Thud. Lucas smiled, signaling the construction crew waiting in the backyard. The rumbling sound of drills and sledgehammers began to rise. Danny didn't cover his ears. He stood there watching the walls of his prison crumble in sections, and a small, relieved smile began to blossom on his lips. 2 weeks later, the room was completely transformed. The fresh scent of new paint replaced the chemical odor. The walls were painted a warm, sunny yellow. In the middle of the room, there was no longer a washing machine, but an easel set for children surrounded by dozens of boxes of colors, brushes, and white paper. "This is your creation room," Lucas said as he led Danny in. "Here you can make as much of a mess as you want. Paint on your shirt, on your hands, on your face. It's completely fine. I give you permission to be messy." The tia. Danny ran in his fingers, gliding over the bright crayon boxes. For the first time, the boy felt that being dirty was not a crime. Just then, a fragrant smell drifted in from the kitchen. The smell of butter-sweet vanilla mixed with the aroma of freshly baked dough. Danny sniffed his little stomach, rumbling softly. From the kitchen door, a familiar figure emerged. No longer in the old shabby clothes, Ms. Gable wore a brand-new crisp housekeeper's uniform. Her hair was neatly tied up her face, glowing and healthy. In her hands was a tray of little bear-shaped cookies still steaming hot from the oven. "Grandma!" Danny shrieked, running toward her. Ms. Gable quickly placed the tray on the table, opening her arms wide to embrace her grandson. She couldn't speak, but the tight hug and the happy tears streaming down her cheeks said it all. She rubbed Danny's back, comforting him, making familiar, soothing sounds. Lucas leaned against the doorway, watching the two of them, his heart filled with a peace that all his money couldn't buy before. The following days were a slow but steady sequence of healing. Lucas canceled all his international travel schedules. He moved his office to the study at home, leaving the door always open so he could hear Danny running and playing. Every evening after dinner, Lucas dedicated time to a special ritual. He would let Danny sit on his lap, taking the jar of herbal balm that Ms. Gable had personally prepared. He gently massaged the cool cream onto the fading scars on his son's arms and hands. "Does it still hurt, son?" "Just a little bit itchy, Dad." "Itchy means new skin is growing. The new skin will be stronger and more beautiful." "Like a superhero changing armor, Dad." "Exactly. You are the bravest superhero I know." The house was always filled with laughter. Ms. Gable taught Danny how to knead dough. White flour flew everywhere, dusting their noses and hair. In the past, this would have been a disaster, leading to confinement and abuse in a locked room. But now, it was the most fun game in the world. One sunny afternoon, 6 months after that fateful day. Lucas was sitting in the garden reviewing financial reports. The tea on the table had gone cold. Danny ran out of the yellow room, the new name for the utility room, holding a large piece of drawing paper, the crayons still smelling new. "Dad, look at this." Lucas put down the stack of documents, taking the drawing from his son. The lines were scribbled and naive, but full of color. On the white paper, Danny had drawn a massive bright red sun in the corner, smiling widely. Under the sun, 3 people were holding hands on a green lawn. A tall man in a blue suit, that was Dad. A woman with her hair in a bun and a white dress, that was Ms. Gable. And in the middle was a tiny boy wearing a shirt covered in colorful dots. No darkness, no washing machine, no chemical bottles. Lucas looked at the drawing, a lump forming in his throat. He realized that in his son's world, now the ghosts of the past had truly been vanquished. "Who did you draw here?" Lucas asked, though he knew the answer, his voice shaky. "Our family dad. You, Grandma Gable, and me." Danny climbed onto his father's lap, wrapping his small arms around Lucas's neck, burying his head into his shoulder with complete trust. "I love you, Dad." 3 simple, fleeting words. But to Lucas, they were heavier than a mountain of gold, more precious than any billion-dollar contract he had ever signed. It was a contract of love, signed with the forgiveness and rebirth of an innocent soul. He hugged his son tightly, kissing his soft hair. The afternoon sun shone down on the garden, bathing everything in gold, warming the father and son after a long, dark winter. 6 months later, the grand ballroom of the Chicago Convention Center was packed. Hundreds of reporters from major and minor newspapers, business partners, and social activists were all present. The flash from cameras created a continuous blinking sea of light, and the buzzing of chatter was constant. Today was not the launch of a new technology product or a sensational merger of the Sterling Corporation. Today was an entirely different event. On the stage, a large, hopeful blue backdrop was unveiled, displaying a simple but impactful white inscription, "The launch of the Danny Children's Protection Fund for a Childhood Without Tears." Lucas Sterling walked out from backstage. He was not wearing his typical powerful black suits. Today, he wore a light gray suit, no tie, appearing much more approachable and relaxed. The applause rose and quickly subsided, giving way to curiosity. Everyone knew about the shocking family scandal 6 months ago, and they waited to see what the man of steel would say. Lucas stood at the podium. He looked down at the crowd, then down at the prepared speech written by his media team on the table. He folded it up and put it in his pocket. He adjusted the microphone, taking a deep breath. "Distinguished guests," Lucas's voice rang out deep and genuine. "I used to think a man's success was measured by the height of the buildings he constructed, by the number of zeros in his bank account. I spent my entire youth chasing those things. I thought that as long as I brought home a lot of money, my son would be happy." The whole auditorium was completely silent. No one dared to breathe heavily. But I was wrong. Terribly wrong. Lucas paused, his gaze distant as if in recollection. "My busyness created voids, created darkness right within my own home, allowing evil to creep in. I allowed my son to endure lonely pain right under the roof I thought was the safest." Abuse is not just physical punishment, it is also neglect. It is the silence of those around us. It is when we see a child's sadness, but choose to look away because it's not our business. Lucas stepped away from the podium, moving closer to the edge of the stage. "I established the Danny Fund not to polish my reputation or to appease my conscience. My conscience will never be at peace, and that is the punishment I deserve. I am doing this because I don't want any more parents to witness their child washing clothes in the dark with festering hands. I pledge 50% of my annual personal profits to permanently finance this fund. We will provide free legal services, psychological treatment support, and build emergency safe houses for child victims of domestic abuse, whether physical or emotional." The applause started sparsely, then erupted like thunder. Many people in the audience discreetly wiped their tears. They saw on the stage not an aloof billionaire, but a repentant father. Lucas smiled, signaling toward backstage. "And now I would like to introduce to you the inspiration, the true hero of today's ceremony." The backstage curtain opened. Danny walked out. The thin, pale boy from before was completely transformed. Danny wore a small suit just like his father's, his face plump and rosy, his eyes shining with confidence. He held Ms. Gable's hand. She was also dressed in an elegant silk dress. Danny was no longer afraid of the crowd. He walked steadily toward his father, holding a bright bouquet of sunflowers almost as large as himself. The entire audience rose to their feet. The applause was louder than ever. Lucas knelt on one knee right on the stage at eye level with his son. He didn't care about the hundreds of cameras pointing at him. He opened his arms wide and Danny rushed into his embrace. "You did so well," Lucas whispered into his son's ear. "I brought you sunflowers so you can always be bright," Danny said, his clear voice carrying through the lapel microphone on Lucas's suit. In that moment, the image of the billionaire father, kneeling, holding his small son with the kind old housekeeper standing beside them and the brilliant bouquet of sunflowers in the center, was captured by photographers. This photo later appeared not just on the front pages of financial newspapers, but became a symbol of rebirth of a father's love triumphing over adversity. Lucas stood up one arm, lifting Danny the other, raising Ms. Gable's hand high as a vow of victory over evil. "Don't let your busy lives blind you," Lucas said his final words into the microphone, his eyes blazing. "Listen to your children. Go home a little earlier. Look into their eyes, because their laughter is more important than any billion-dollar contract, and their cry is the most urgent sound you will ever need to hear." The ceremony concluded with emotional tears and hopeful smiles. Lucas did not linger to give interviews or socialize. He held Danny and together with Ms. Gable. They walked down from the stage, blending into the crowd. They walked slowly, side by side. Outside, the city of Chicago was still bustling, preoccupied with the anxieties of daily life. But in Lucas's heart, time seemed to slow down. He knew the road ahead was still long, but he would never walk alone again. Danny's small hand rested securely in his, warm and trusting.